Our next presenter is from Canada, and this is Cam Stewart with Santé West.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having us. We are Santé West. So I'll start out by explaining our team a little bit to give you a bit of an idea of where our idea came from. So we're all mechanical engineers from the University of British Columbia up in Vancouver. Megan's specialty is in biomedical engineering and design. Baden has an expertise in manufacturing and design. And myself, Cam Stewart, have experience in injury biomechanics and some of our affiliations. Now, one of the interesting perspectives that we bring to our design here is we've all been elite athletes and competed at some point in our lives. Myself, I was a member of the Canadian Alpine ski team. So I was named into the team in 2007. We were down in Chile actually training. I was a group that they were hoping to send to the Olympics. And while I was down there, I suffered a career-ending leg break. Now, like a lot of athletes, I was lying on the snow, thinking, will I make it to the Olympics? And I've worked my butt off. Am I going to lose everything that I've worked so hard to gain? So this story has actually happened to a lot of people. Athletes, definitely. Elite athletes suffer this problem. And in the United States and Canada alone, there's about 100,000 people, or 100,000 elite athletes, that are suffering from injuries to the knee and below every year. Now, it's not just athletes who are suffering this pain. And I have a beautiful assistant, Mary Hagmeyer, actually. And the reason that I'm bringing Mary up, I met her last night at the banquet. She was really a great story, and I've found this story in a lot of places. People are suffering these injuries everywhere. Mary herself had a meniscus tear, and she's just recovering from surgery. As you can tell, she's on crutches. Thank you, Mary. So, Mary, if I may ask, if you could sum up your recovery in one word, what would that be?
Well, it's about like the approach to the stage. It's cumbersome.
Cumbersome, exactly. So, you saw her come up on stage, and this is the pain that a lot of people are feeling. So, the military is obviously a big application. There's about 130,000 troops every year that are injured with knee and below injuries. Senior and obese people suffering from degenerative disorders affecting their mobility, as well as medical condition sufferers such as foot ulcers with diabetes. So we wanted to quantify this market. We took the top 4 common injuries in the United States and Canada, as well as included foot ulcer sufferers, and this is our total addressable market. So that totaled about 2.2 million people. Next, we focused in for our segmented available market. So this is injuries just from sports, and again, injuries to the knee and below. This is about 200,000 and includes that 100,000 that I mentioned earlier. And next, our segmented obtainable market. So this is what we hope to aim at for early adopters. And this is about 2,500 elite athletes, a portion of that 100,000. So how do you treat this? Well, currently, doctors would send you home from an injury like this or after surgery and prescribe partial weight bearing. Now, it's been identified by the medical community as one of the most important concepts in expedited recovery. So we at Santé West have developed a lower leg brace which attaches to the upper thigh and affords the ability for the user to incrementally adjust the amount of weight that's experienced by that injured area. Now, the device can be worn directly out of surgery and can be worn all the way to full weight bearing. So some of the current solutions for partial weight bearing, you'll go into your doctor and they'll say, maybe try putting one foot on a bathroom scale, measure what 25% of your body weight feels like, and then remember that throughout the rest of the day. So as you can imagine, and this would be something like a cane or crutches, and again, cumbersome, right, Mary? So it's also a safety concern. If you take a stumble, it's imprecise. It's also user dependent. You're always having to think about that, how much weight you're bearing. Next is a biofeedback device. Now, again, this is the same principle. You're looking at a certain percentage of your body weight, but it's really user dependent. You're always having to think about that and focus on that. And they're expensive. And finally, underwater and pressurized treadmills are something that people are using currently. So you're going into a physiotherapy clinic to use these. It's inconvenient having to travel to that physiotherapy clinic, and it's limited benefit. You're only doing that, let's say, 3 times a week for half an hour, say. So our device really allows you to do that throughout the day, really not impacting your lifestyle. We developed our value proposition and we identified 3 different users within that. So for the user buyer, it's going to help them maintain their strength throughout the recovery and get them back to their sport or activity sooner. The technical buyer, which is really important, this is the decision maker. So the person that's recommending the device to the patient, they see benefit through improved clinical outcomes as well as a expedited recovery. And the economic buyer would be someone like the sports team management or the insurance company seeing reduced costs for rehabilitation, recurrence, and future complication. So to hit home on an economic scale for the average person, a 100-day study of an ankle fracture found that recovery with partial weight bearing got them back to their lives 37 days sooner and helped them realize thousands of dollars in saved costs. So we really wanted to validate this idea. We talked to the people getting injured, we talked to the doctors recommending and treating those devices, we talked to the insurance company that are reimbursing for these devices and paying for that unit, as well as sports teams and physiotherapists. They helped us to identify the number one most important thing would be to build our credibility. And to do that, we're going to look to scientific literature. This is where the doctors are finding out information about their new products. And we'll also use our champion customers, so orthopedic surgeons, and elite athletes to show the efficacy of our device and really reach out into the medical community. We're happy to say currently we've got Dr. Mark Hurd on board as well as Dr. Julia Hamilton. Dr. Mark Hurd, as I understand, would be similar to Dr. James Andrews of the area around here, up in Western Canada. He treats a lot of the Olympic team athletes. And Dr. Julia Hamilton works in Toronto with the Canadian Ballet, for instance. And Mr. Blair Simonite, so he's helping us, a serial entrepreneur, helping us to develop our financial projections as well as our business plan. Now, obviously there's barriers to market. The first of which, regulatory considerations. So we've identified our device to be a Class 1 medical device with the FDA as well as Health Canada, which is great. It's perfect for us. It exempts us from a number of pre-market approvals, so it allows us to work with early adopters. And it also helps us with our clinical trials. So they're not mandatory for approval, but it's something that we will do to build that credibility. We've spoken to a number of insurance companies as well. They've validated the cost of our device. They would expect to reimburse about $1,500 for a device like this. And they've given us early indication of approval, so we've started that process of attaining codes for reimbursal. So why do we win? Well, our competitive strategy, we're a disruptive technology. There's nothing that's this personalized, this convenient for the user. It'll be important for us to dial down our IP right away at the beginning. Next of which, it's a proven science. It's not something that's new to people. Doctors are implementing this in their rehabilitation programs already. Patients are comfortable with that, so it's established. And lastly, we're an innovative company. We're small. We don't have to work through the grinding gears of the bureaucracy of bigger companies, and we can get first to market fast. So for our intellectual property approach, we've identified that partial weight bearing isn't something that you can patent. This is something quite established. So we'll take a mechanistic approach. And some of the pictures that you see there are actually other patents that exist. We've done a number of prior art searches and haven't come up with anything that would infringe on our design. And we'll look to get our patent in early February of next year. So to get our first customer, we're really going to tap into our networks of having been elite athletes ourselves. We know a number of elite athletes, professional sports teams, and unfortunately having been injured, a number of orthopedic surgeons. So we'll really use that to our advantage, as well as our university. Some of the varsity teams we've started to get in contact with, and they're going to help us with our early case studies. And as well our champion customers, as I mentioned. We'll attend a number of conferences and trade shows so that we can really expose ourselves to the market and get into the medical community. And then down the line, we'll look to partnerships with some of the bigger established companies, potentially licensing agreements, So our revenue model initially will focus on our early adopters with direct sales. We'll use that price point of about $1,500. This will get us early revenues, but more importantly, it'll get us case studies and get us a lot of information and data and build that credibility of our company and our product. So from there, we'll move to the future segments. Again, we'll use that same retail price. We'll look to a 50% margin initially, and then work on our economies of scale to really get as much as we can out of that product with our manufacturing. So focusing on organic growth would be great for us. For our financial projections, as it's a medical device company, you can imagine it's a little bit longer timeline. There's a couple barriers and obstacles to jump through prior to that. We will need to do clinical studies, but we really wanted to make sure that we could tell a story with our financial projections and understand and anticipate what we were up against. So here you'll see the revenue, the cost of goods sold, and their gross margin. So we'll look for funding at the beginning of 2015. We've identified a number of government programs that are great for us, so we'll look to tap into that. We'll do our Canadian launch prior to 2016, shortly followed by our US launch after 2016. And again, as I mentioned, we'll do clinical trials, and we'll aim to do one prior to our launch and then one following our launch when we can differentiate our product a little bit more. So where are we today? So we've built a comprehensive prototype. In the next couple of weeks and months, we'll look to implement that with the sports teams at our university, do some individual case studies. The biggest thing here is we want to get a lot of feedback on our device. We really want to dial it in for usability, because as you can see here with Mary, things are inconvenient. People want something that's convenient for them to get on with their lives. At the beginning of the year, we'll do our Health Canada and FDA registration, and then focus on our patent application shortly thereafter. And by middle of next year, we're looking to implement this with sports and military markets. So success at this event would give us the financial backing to do some of those case studies and really iterate our prototype, get something that's usable for the person, get a lot of data from the individuals that are using that. And then from that, we'll need some more funding. We'll look to government programs to help us with our patent as well as the registration process. We've identified that the Department of Defense in the US is actually has a number of orthopedic grant programs, which are great for us. We can hopefully tap into that, and we've started the process of getting in touch with those folks. So to summarize, I just want to say we believe that we've got the team, and we've felt this pain. It's something that we've all gone through, a number of people. I can't imagine that some of you don't know someone who hasn't had a knee or lower injury. So we've really felt that pain, and we've really identified with folks like Mary here that it's a trouble or a pain that a lot of people are feeling, and there's a big market for that. We've got the technology, and with the treasure that we could hopefully gain from this event, we'll look to further iterate our prototype and really get that feedback that we can so that we can aim to market as fast as we can. So a big thank you to you, a big thank you to Mary, and thank you very much. We're Santé West, looking to get you back to your life sooner. Thank you very much. Sounds good. Thank you.
Great. How much customization is needed for this device? Is it something that has to be molded for each patient, or is there a certain number of versions you could foresee making?
Right, and initially, as you could have told by the prototype, I think I've got a slide here, it's quite personalized. It's something that in our individual case studies we will probably do on a personalized level. When we launch into our early adopters, we'll do a sizing sort of thing, so small, medium, large, extra large, to tailor that, and it's something we have identified that that's possible to do. And then once we differentiate, we've identified in the industry right now, there's a number of customizations that you can do. I've actually torn my ACL myself, and my partner doesn't have an ACL right now, so she just went through the process of getting a brace. And you go in, you have a fitting, a week's time, you'll have a custom-made brace. So that's something that we'll aim for down the road.
What are the potential, or have you looked through the potential unintended adverse consequences of bypassing God's given weight-bearing system?
Mm-hmm. And like I said, partial weight bearing isn't something that's new. We're just providing an avenue to apply that. So it is something that definitely we'll have to consider. Being a medical device, there are things that it can affect gait, alignment, things like that. So it'll be important for us to work with our orthopedic surgeons and our advisors to help get that feedback early and design for that so we can hopefully avoid.
So how does the device work? The weight bearing, what part of your body is actually bearing the weight?
Yeah.
And I assume that shows a solid piece of metal, but I assume the knee will bend.
Absolutely, yeah.
So talk to us about what the device is going to look like past the prototype stage.
Yeah, definitely. I'll race through this, but I'll continue talking. So what we aim to do is definitely incorporate that a knee joint. There's a number of knee joints commercially available, so what we wanted to do is really aim to get something onto the user's leg right away and get that usability. But we also identified that that's something that we'll have to put a little bit more design work into. So we can work on getting the usability dialed in. Pardon me, one more here. So we'll work on getting that usability dialed in first, and then we'll incorporate the knee joint. There are, like I said, a number of commercially available, so we may look to a partnership to incorporate into our product.
And given the design and your statement earlier that it's difficult to get IP on this, I mean, ultimately, this looks like a pretty simplistic device. What makes this unique? What makes it special? What keeps someone else from just making something very similar?
Right, you got it. I mean, partial weight bearing, it's not new. It's something people are using. So the mechanism that we've got is actually in the lower, we can't disclose it at the moment, but it's in the lower portion. And it would be a mechanistic approach to that. So there's no mechanism that we've identified that is applied for partial weight bearing right now. So the approach that we're going to take is patenting that mechanism, and we're actually working with 2 particular mechanisms right now and looking to differentiate which one would be best applied for this purpose.
Actually, there are several questions about, give us a little more detail on how this thing actually works and what the user is able to do to, dial in the right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the first thing would be a fitting process. So you'd work with your surgeon or your physiotherapist. You'd have the device. You'd fit it properly, and you'd dial it in for your weight. So it would be something that you'd tune the mechanism for.
Is there like an adjustment on the?
Exactly, yeah. So it would be something that you would tune the mechanism for, and then the user could have, there's a pretty simplistic, it would sort of say 25, 50, 75%, or whatever we would have. And the user could just use that to dial in their particular weight that they were looking to bear. And they'd work with their physician and the physiotherapist throughout their treatment to make sure that that's something that they were capable of doing, and if they were accelerated or if they should slow things down a bit.
So is the user able to adjust it almost like on the fly? Let's say they've dialed in maybe a little bit more than they're trying to walk, and they're able to change it right there and
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Okay. I mean, it wouldn't be a hip mechanism. It would be something down near the foot, but it could be something that we incorporate up at the hip at some point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you want a question? Okay. Let me just see. There were a couple questions here from the audience. What is the process you have to follow to register this product to be approved by the Health Institute? How long does it take, and how much will that cost?
Yeah, so we have identified that it's a Class 1 medical device. And sorry, I'll race through these again. But as a Class 1 medical device, it takes about 3 to 9 months. We've talked to a number of people who have gone through this process as well. So it takes about 3 to 9 months. The costs associated with it, I'll bring up here just in a second. So for registering it with Health Canada, it would be about $7,500. And with the FDA, as I said, it would be a 510K, which means it's an existing device or existing idea, the principle of partial weight bearing or orthosis, would be about $4,000 in that range.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?